Back on a turbo cruise in the top right as the blue Terran, it is Dream. In the bottom left is the red Protoss, it is Stats. We saw this in action in that PVZ, and the inhibitor zones did not play as big of a part as maybe they could have. What ended up playing a huge part is just how much of a concave slash, pincer attack you can do. The inhibitor zones are extremely large, and that's usually a point against them, but they're large because they're covering what is not actually that much of a choke. It's not that bad. You can fit quite a large arsenal, core, whatever official word for an army. You can fit a lot through there, especially if it's like Marines. I would imagine a lot can fit through there. Not that I really ever try, because I don't want to go through the slow zone. Yeah, slow zone. But yeah, didn't really think about how much could at least make its way through here. Then you're talking about a huge concave over here, and then as I was saying, describing the map kind of post game number 1, is that this is not that much of a choke. It's also far enough away from the Nexus that, like, okay, you're not jumping on top of the Nexus. That's the good news, or the command center, or whatever it is. That's the good news. You can't, attack it and then run back through the choke, thus making it, well, actually a little bit favorable for the attacker. It does mean that if someone's trying to split against an army, they really have to go way down here to react to this, and then way back up there to react to that, which does lead to their natural, which could also be vulnerable in certain situations. I'm not sure this could happen in this matchup, though. That Zerg attack, whether it's up 55 drones or 65, and it has Hydras included in tech, and it's just an attack, not a timing. We see so much more often those huge concaves and those split attacks, because the difference of army, not supply, but I mean, it is supply, but the amount of units you have to work with, I don't think is as extreme as it is in ZVP, right? Protoss are still working off a very low actual units count, because their units are more expensive and more chunky and better per mineral, because it really costs more minerals, actually. That you are forced to really make tough decisions, where, Terran's a little bit easier. You get a couple tanks, hopefully it can help with the splash. You can make replace the storms, I guess, for the other matchup, but then they also have so many Marines and Marauders to split through, that it doesn't get as nearly as extreme. So I don't think we'll see the same dynamic, but there are a couple of other things to talk about in this matchup specifically. First of all, this is kind of cute. The Stalker can't run away like it should, which is what Dream was hoping for. That's why I tried taking this position, but it does still micro against Marines technically. This was cuter than I anticipated. But I'm thinking, while this doesn't really matter very much, there are some nice little positions. Let's actually look at stats base here. So he takes this as a 3rd, and that's not really so abusive for the tanks. But if you're talking about this as a 4th, tanks on this side, Liberators kind of like this, and taking over this spot, so they're in the... What's the word? What's the word? Speaking for a living is hard. The dead zone. There we go. And they're in the dead zone. That's when defending this 4th base is probably the biggest issue in this matchup, or in TVT, I would say as well. The bunker coming down, a little scared of how much pressure is being applied. How aggressive Stats can still be with the Stalker. We're not talking about Stats now. No longer Zest. She's cast 2 Zest series in a row, so I actually kind of forgot for a second. The Stats, like many other Protoss, is still opening up with Twilight Council, Blink, and he could try and be aggressive with Stalkers, but that would leave him open to the What Am I drop, which Dream is still trying to go for. By the way, inhibitor zone, not just in the middle, but on the little sides here as well. He's preparing for that drop. Stalker is a little far to the left, though. Dream going for more direct approach to the mineral line. Drops off 3 Widow Mines. What they're gonna get? Not too bad, especially the one on the bottom side. And he will pick up and try to escape, but Blink's almost done. One more shot. Jesus Christ. We're good. We're good. And Stats By the way, not going for this third base over here, but going for this one. I think we will see some indecision, some flip-flopping, some personal preference show itself about which base to take in which matchup. It's not 100% for certain yet, but I could definitely see a case for both. I could see a case for one or the other depending on the matchup. This would... It doesn't have the high ground like the other base does in case the attack comes through there, but... Do I actually like this base better? I don't know. We'll see how it works out. All learning experience here. Hey, Annie. Charge is on the way, followed up by the double forge. Stats feeling rather comfortable. Moving out on the map, we're dealing with that medevac drop. 6 probes and observer went down. I didn't know the observer went down. It's funny. But it did come home to be repaired. Raven would be the best choice, the best target here. Not going to happen. Good blink down. Taking a little bit too much pepper on that one stalker, but he's Gucci. He's just a little wounded. He's just missing like a couple arms. Or I guess in this case, like T-Rex arms. They're not really useful anyways, though, so who cares if he loses them? Like, seriously, what is the point of that? Like, can you imagine, you know how Hydras have a melee attack when they're up close to something? Roaches, too. Can you imagine if the Stalker, if it was up to a melee range or something, started using these tiny little T-Rex claws? You know how comical that would look? I mean, they can't help with balance. We're talking about something that's like in a perfect little square here. It's not like it's gonna work like a tail for a cat. What the hell is the purpose of this? Okay, anyways. Talking way too much about that. Widowmine drop did come back in. I thought it went home because I could not see it on the mini-map, but I guess it was so far tucked into the corner. And I guess Stats also figured it had gone somewhere else. So he kind of forgot about it temporarily. 8 probes go down for it, and the medevac even lives, which is just... At this point, it's not supposed to happen, I would say. Like, 9 times out of 10, you lose that medevac, either through sacrifice or because you can't escape through one direction or another. So it's really nice when the medevac actually lives. Dream has been trying to do his best, just a macro. Just be like, please don't touch me, let me do my thing. For the most part, he's been able to do his thing. Going into a third CC on location behind a good power-up of 2 bases with 3 barracks. He's got that Raven at full energy, and he's going to choose to go through the middle of the map. I have not done any math on it, because math is for nerds. Dweebs. Just kidding. But if you go the non-inhibitor zone way, it does take quite a while. I just think the way that Stats expanded, that it would actually be more of a reason to go. Yeah, at the very least avoid this one, you know, obviously, but even going from here to here. But you know what? Yeah, I really don't like this base taken for Stats. I think he might change his mind in the future. We are talking about pretty close to the Nexus, and then when you run through the choke, the tanks are abusing the space I said they would, even though the example was on the other side of the map. And if there were a couple Liberators, this could have been deadly, but no Liberators. The Raven did make its use of an anti-armor missile and an interference matrix, and this might just be a good enough attack from Dream. The tank finally does get targeted down. Apparently an Immortal can reach through there, and the upgrades have been in Stats' favor, but he loses a lot of expensive units. That wasn't just the cost of all of his Zealots and a couple of Stalkers. That was the Sentries going down, the Immortals going down, all the Stalkers going down. So even if Stats holds with his Zealot count, and he might just... decent forces coming through here to help out, he is not in a good position. This is where you have to just hope that they do miss micro against charge lots, and that 2-2 does finish, and that they they got a dirt versus charge lots, to be honest. That's the position I think he's in. Dream knows the ferociousness, though, of Zealots. Occasionally, you do have that bigger supply. You are still in equal upgrades, but because you're reinforcing, they get the wraparound. They get this. They get the supply just barely high enough. So he's gonna respect that. Gonna go for a drop as opposed to just forcing his way through. Might also be afraid of just how many Charlottes could be coming through with a Guardian Shield, especially something that Stats was lacking since the Sentries died. Or the drop is deterred, just barely not losing the drop. It is being covered by an Observer. You never want to stay still under Observer too long, even if it does take Stats a long time to get around here. I guess he could blink down and then run, Always a little scary. Dream's gonna entirely reevaluate his position, go for the left side. That is a weird choice. Yeah, I'm gonna go with weird choice. Especially in this case, because Stats had Zealots running across the right side, which if he had been rallying through, would have been easy pickoffs. Instead, they're gonna get a couple of Zealots and distract Dream just a little bit. He is going to set up some Liberators, though, so whether it was the right or left choke, he's going to find some use through them. Okay, not that much of a choke, but Liberator zones are pretty large. The Forceful Dart coming down here to try and split that army into, basically push them into the Zealots, but it might just not be enough. The Liberators are not being taken out either, so they're getting very effective shots off on those Zealots to help out the bio. Now, the Immortals were chunking through there. The Stalkers actually have some DPS, especially because they finally finished those 2-2 upgrades. That wasn't a terrible attack. Dream was actually coming into that with like a 20 supply lead, which I guess he still has an army, but now we're talking about so much of that coming from the other side of the map through these inhibitor zones. Can Stats continue to hold? He's got to take care of these Liberators somehow. That is the worst thing right now. 2 more Liberators come in. A single Widow Mine, too, that even though it's scouted, okay, now it's 3 Widow Mines, is difficult to actually take care of. You could try and sacrifice a Zealot. You could try and only get 1 Stalker hit by that, but you have an urgent need to blink forward and take care of the Liberator count before it grows to 8 or, God forbid, 10. But I think it's too late. I think these Liberators might just be too strong. There's barely any charge lots here, so nothing's soaking up the Marauder damage, except Stalkers, which are terrible at it. And they also cannot take out all these Liberators. And this is going to be Dream's victory, even though it took a little longer. It was a little closer than I expected, considering his great advantage with his positioning. And it's down to these... If there's no like charge lots on the field, there's no sentries on the field, things get so much less complicated for a Terran player. You can really start to correctly evaluate, even if the upgrades aren't in your favor. Charge lots just make things so different. They're good. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say that. Terran bias here, but they also just have the ability to actually wrap around and force your miss micro, your mistakes from the Terran. Stalkers? Nah. Stalker's easy 1-to-1. I know Marauder beats a Stalker, and there's not much that the Stalker can do about that. Zealot run-bys are, again, trying to at least distract, if not kill a lot of SCVs. They get 4. Don't do much distraction. Dream literally sieging up into Stats' natural. Stats doesn't want to give up yet. He still had the economy up until now to maybe hold, but he did not have the army remax potential. Stalkers get obliterated. Only take down 1 of those Liberators. Nothing to take down the Liberators over here. I think that some Stalkers tried. That's it. Dream take game number 1. What's a Thunderbird as second choices? Maybe pros actually really like this map. I think it was all down to Stats taking the 3rd on the right. Never really want to pinpoint one thing exactly in a game, but I think that's the most impactful thing about it. He also maybe should have had a wider concave when he was coming in. Maybe he overestimated his position. Maybe he should have had more Stalkers instead of more Zealots, or vice versa. But I think a lot of that had to do with the 3rd positioning. I'm going to say he's going to change his expansion process on that map as the season goes by. I mean, we're still talking about the first 2 weeks of this map pool, so we might not see a lot of Thunderbird. We'll definitely see it occasionally, and if it's going to be in PvT, I feel strongly that Stats will take the other base. But hey, maybe I didn't consider an abusive spot on the other base. Maybe Stats has already tried other base and it died to something else that was well positioned. I don't know. In the bottom right, he is down 1. It is the blue Protoss Stats. In the top left is the red Terran. He is Dream. So dreamy. As far as Terran play goes, I actually don't remember what he looks like in real life. It's been a while since I've seen his face in GSL. I remember Bunny. Bunny's been there recently enough, but Dream made it to the round of 32. I don't think I watched much of his group. Right? Didn't he? He did, right? the amount of Korean pros, sad to say, does mean you have a certain expectation that is usually met about who enters into the GSL the round of 32. Not 100%, you know, the foreigners aren't easily getting in there because there's not enough Korean pros, that's not what I'm saying, but you do kind of expect it to be a certain amount, certain people. The B listers, the code A, if it was actually a thing, Korean pros aren't, unfortunately, they're not quite good enough to really bump up to that next level, which whole discussions could be done about the gap between the A-listers and the B-listers in the Korean scene. There's far less of a gap, I would say, in the other regions, where you do have a continual fight for the top in Europe, going all the way down to like the bottom 50th guy in those qualifiers still has a chance. You know, we had a Razor Blader, someone who don't really consider guaranteed to qualify, actually qualify against many other people. You have Showtime occasionally not making it through qualifiers. There's struggles there. NA is also just even less. Like, you might have the top 4 people, Neeb, Scarlet, Special, Kelzer, some other names, but besides that, you're talking about a lot of up-and-comers, comparative newbies to the tournament scene making their way through. Not really what happens in GSL. Not so much. Now, that was all just buying time for something interesting to happen. Finally happens. Hellions are being produced back at home, and a starport is being proxied. So, good old Hellion drop. Stats went for, I think, what... I don't really pin stats as either Stargate or Twilight. Not like I do with Zest for Twilight or Trap for Stargate. But I do think I go more towards Stargate for stats when I think about them. So in my mind, I like this choice. But it also is just something to be different, mix things up. It could be effective against a Hellion drop, if it knew about it, if it was in the right position. Currently, not a lot of scouting has been done past the probe and I guess the adept shading through. Hasn't seen the reactor factory. Will now barely catch a glimpse. Holy shit, did it actually catch that? I don't think it did. I think those Hellions were too skinny and they barely slipped past there. So the Phoenix will scout the reactor factory, and that should be a good enough thing to say, hey, Hellions. But... And he also saw that there's no starport. So right now, stats should be going X plus Z plus Y equals B, Z, and he's figuring things out. His Phoenix even goes searching for the starport, but it's as the attack is ready to go, so he's not quite prepared here. Adept shade into the main base. Second Phoenix tries to come out. He's actually better off lifting, I think, the second Hellion, because you need 3 Hellions to one-shot the probes. If you take out 2, suddenly they need 2 shots, but... He does, regardless of whatever his micro could have been, lose 8 probes. He does take care of every single unit. That is the benefit of the Stargate against harassment. You can almost guarantee killing whatever they try and throw at you. But do you take enough damage to warrant it? It's actually a tough question to answer. 8 probes would be kind of directly the cost of the Hellions. But the way that, you know, tempo works in StarCraft 2 doesn't mean that's a direct trade, really. But then he also loses the medevac. He also loses time on the starport production as it gets sent back home. Don't think he'll lose a starport, but that could have been a threat, and that would have been devastating. I don't know, I feel like Stats actually is going to be okay with that trade. Now his Phoenix can kind of contain a little bit. They're almost guaranteed to find a couple of SCVs here and there. And I think Stats is okay with how that went down, especially considering just how clutch the timing was of the scout. See your wrongness. Robotics Bay on the way here, so pretty quick into the Colossus, but thinking they can actually afford to go for a third Nexus. It's about 70% done. Certainly not a super fast third Nexus. One that definitely is understandable, but Colossus do have that kind of, they're great. They have the splash, they have the just simple fear into the hearts of any Marines, especially without combat shields. But their downside is that they're so expensive and a little slow making that you don't get 2 forges. You don't have a lot of army supporting them. So sometimes you see Protoss stay a long time on 2 base. But considering how everything went down, and this is not the greatest third base, I am still in that whole, like, I like where Stats' position is. It doesn't look like he's chronoing probes. Actually, he's not chronoing anything right now. Oh, there we go. Colossus. He has so much energy, I thought he was not doing it, which would be weird for me to criticize Stats as a macro machine. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to criticize it for 1 second here. He has chrono that could have been in the probes. Could have been 65 probes a lot faster. I did it, guys. I criticized Stats macro. I know. I wonder, I actually have to ask like a pro Protoss. What is actually going through a Protoss's head when they have this much energy stacked up? Like, to a certain extent, I gotta imagine that they're saving for a recall. Maybe on like a Phoenix, or if they are going for a Warp Prism. And to another extent, I guess they're saving for like a couple of chronos on emergencies. So, yes, it's tempting to chrono +1. But if the attack is on the way, then you're going to regret that, and you're going to wish you had chrono on the Colossus. But sometimes I'm actually like, okay, I'll give that much credit to pros. You always want to assume they're doing things correctly. But is there a mistake being made? Should I call that out? Anyways, there is an attack on the way. I believe that's Dream's first indication of the Colossus. He did see a Robo follow-up, but yeah, no Robotics Bay. He might have figured out that it's Colossus very quickly going into Vikings anyways at the first sight of the laser beams. Phoenix will stop any drop play, which is one of the weaknesses of Colossus play. Not only having that lower supply count, so a concave can be brutal. He's not really at that position anymore. I mean, that's a lot of units, but earlier on. Also can't deal with drops, also does not have that fast of a blink, so it can't deal with Vikings if you go immediately into Vikings. If Dream was coming through here with 8 or 10 Vikings already, because he planned on doing a very specific attack against a Colossus builder, it's a little scary. A little scary. Phoenix can only help out so much when there's that many Vikings, especially if you're not going into like pure Phoenix Colossus. But that's not what Dream was setting up. He is now responding to the Colossus. He's going to go to a second starport. He's going to get a Ghost Academy, really go into the macro PVT, full steam ahead. And Stats will as well, realizing that he did not need to worry about that attack and that he should just go ahead and get all the upgrades, even getting some Warp Prism speed here. All right then. All right. Now, Dream will have a nice production round very, very soon. Once you're fully saturated on the 3 base, you can afford 5, 1, 2. 2 being the starport, 5 being the barracks. You don't actually even afford anything for the factory anymore, so yeah, it's more like 5, 2. If you're not getting supply blocked, uh-oh. Well, that's a straight up mistake, I can tell you that much. And then it will come down to not who has the counters to each other. They'll both have counters to each other. It'll come down to micro. It'll come down to who's paying attention. And one of the best things you can do to make people stop paying attention to the army that's very hard to control for both sides, okay, give your Protoss some credit, is a Warp Prism. One of my drops are kind of cool for that too, but this is just purely for harassment, nothing else going on. Does catch Stats a little by surprise, but he's already kind of thinking about dealing with harassment a little bit here. Cannon in the 3rd base. Medevac somehow gets out alive despite Phoenix. Way to go, girl. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, guys. 2-2 is now on the way. We saw Dream in an earlier series kind of abandon all hope of going to the Supreme late game. Played a very different game straight into Liberators. He had a plan of attack that just simply did not work. This is something that can go into as late of a game as you want. You get upgrades on the way. Vikings, I actually kind of had a rant about this on my own ladder stream yesterday. I actually really don't think Liberators are very good anymore. And I know someone out there is like, are you kidding me? Liberators are amazing. You're just playing it badly. Sure. Yeah. I'll admit that I'm bad. But Liberators kind of stick you in a place. They're siege units, so they're hard to control. But it also means that you have to start and stop. You have to re-siege and unsiege, just whether your control is good or not. So the Protoss is in such a comfortable position as, say, right now, we're going 4 bases, right? Can kind of beep-bop around, get the Tempest relatively safely, and if you don't hit a very crisp attack, a very crisp siege hop attack into the 3rd base before they get the Tempests, Liberators look kind of lame. They are more supplement than they are main army, unlike Legacy of the Void, 2 years ago? I feel like Liberators, Mass Liberators is all the rage with all their range. Clever. Not anymore. Actually, not a big fan anymore. I think Vikings are going to be the flexible tool to use, and just straight up you need to get to them if they're going to go into Tempest, which is this current situation. So I'm glad to see it. Again, don't mind Liberators as a supplement, but hard to control and kind of just get picked off usually. Hard to control, still kind of true for this army, regardless of the Liberator count. Stats has a lot of AoE. Whoa, that EMP was amazing. Damn, the Protoss army clumped hard. But it was amazing on a lot of non-High Templar units, so it's still the heart that you want to really grab and rip out of the Protoss chest is all of their High Templars. But Stats is not silly. He has them way back, and he also has some reinforcing storms in case Dream gets a little too bold. Meanwhile, the War Prism has gone in to just absolutely destroy Dream's economy, making him feel even more pressure to end this game right here, right now. But oh boy, it's not going to happen. So much for that super late game. Dream throws away almost 100 supply, I guess, plus the SCVs into so much splash. It just did not look pretty. 3 Colossus, 3 Tempest, and a handful of other ground units on, still alive and moving their way forward. And that is going to be it. Stats with the swift victory once Dream decided to attack. This is where you would cue a lot of Terran wine, but I'm just going to go ahead and sit here and say that Stats played that well. But perhaps more importantly, Dream did not play that as patiently as one should. Yeah. Yeah. Seriously, though. It looks really tempting for anyone in any league, in any game, to get the EMPs and be like, I'm gonna win, and then they don't. So I think we all understand where Dream was coming from right there. But no PvT ends well when the Terran is in fast mode. When the Terran has got to go fast like Sonic, he's not cool like Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 on like the Sega Genesis. He's like the new Sonic that looks really fucking weird as from outer space and no one likes. And he dies because of it. Even though you think it's awesome because Jim Carrey is going to probably do an amazing job upholding that movie. It's not. The faster you feel the need to end that engagement, the worse it probably looks. But also kudos to Stats for always having those backup storms. Every good Protoss should always have backup storms. In the top right, as the blue Terran, it is Dream. In the bottom left, as the red Protoss, it is Stats. Who wants Terran wine I can deliver? Well, imbecile, you are appropriately named. Nah, I'm just playing. At least the movie got delayed and they're fixing Sonic. So I guess the analogy continued is that at least Dream still has this match to win. He doesn't just lose the series. My analogy holds up surprisingly well. But much like the Sonic movie, I'm pretty sure Dream is going to feel super rushed and like he can't do a good job anymore. Much like the animators will, and the modelers and the riggers of the Sonic movie. And he'll probably die in this game. That's my guess. Mostly to keep up with the analogy, but also a little bit of a lot of Terrans do not have the logic to say, hey, I have as good a chance as any. I won game number 1. They don't have the logic to say, oh, the win rate's not that bad, which I'm actually not sure what it currently is at, but, you know, whatever. They're feeling that they just got Protossed, and Protoss, and all my other Terran friends say that Protoss, and I just got Protossed, and it sucks. And why did I even play this last game? Just a little bit of that. And every one of us. Ditto for Protoss, ditto for Zerg. Every single one of us does that thing, or like that race raced me, and they're stupid, and all my other race friends hate that race, and that's why I lost. Don't tell me you've not been there, because I know you have. This Reaper doing a surprise amount of damage. Looks like stats did go for Nexus before 7x score. No, he did not. No, actually, that's an Adept. The Probe is currently being corralled, and that's the Adept, so no, he just sent the step across the map. That's why the Reaper was able to do some damage. Actually, more damage than I really expected. 3, almost 4 probes. Well, 2, almost 3, and then the one scouting probe. But the Adept not only gets some revenge, delays the command center a little bit, also gets into the main base and is looking for that second kill. But luckily, us Terrans get 3-shot by Adepts, not 2-shot. Yay. Why does everyone assume that they work overtime? Because a year is not actually time enough to rig and model and animate an entirely new thing. You also have to relight and re-render everything. Like, I could be wrong. I'm a novice, all things considered, despite my major literally being in that field of work. But when you combine that with every single report of CGI studios being overworked and underpaid, it makes the most sense. That is a sneaky Widow Mine. I didn't see that Widow Mine, neither did Stats. That does help a lot. Bunker was not done, and there weren't quite enough Marines to deal with 3 Adepts. But, 2 Adepts do escape with their lives. Hellion also somehow lived against whatever it was chasing. Stargate opener for Stats has yet to create... Oh, okay, so he's not going for an Oracle. Again, no Oracle, just Phoenix. I feel like everyone says that they were rushed. No, we're not saying that the movie was rushed in the first place. We're saying that the delay on the movie will not result in anything substantially better. Because they're going to be super overworked. And because it's not even that they're overworked, it's just like really a very difficult task to fit into a year. It's not quite as extreme, but in the same vein of like completely replacing a main actor. Colossus once again. Into, again, like that pretty safe 3rd Nexus timing. Single Forge 2, no greed really in sight. Dream has taken a moderate amount of damage. His build order has probably been messed up because of all these Adepts, more so than Stats has. But he is still working with what he's got, finishing that 3 barracks. Dealing with the Phoenix harassment as well as he can. Loses a Viking, which can help in the air with the main attack, or even on the ground, the main attack. Yes, absolutely true, Kitty Lynn. Absolutely true. I don't care about how he looks. I care that the movie looks absolutely awful. Well, I don't think any of us were really expecting a lot from a video game movie. That they have set expectations and have mostly matched them. And by match them, I mean matched poor expectations. Sans 1 or 2 movies, I guess. But also that it was just, yeah, it looked very kiddie and very out of touch. I do think Jim Carrey, as what's-his-face, could actually, you know, be okay to make the movie watchable. You know, like an airplane watch, or you have to go to the movies with your 6-year-old because they've been whining about it. Might make it go okay. No action as we're waiting for Dream to finish up his upgrades. He does have a Rave in this game, which it looks like he's actually been doing a decent job of either hiding because he doesn't want to lose it, obviously, or because he actually legitimately wants to hide that it was even made in the first place. Let's check Stats Vision real quick. Okay, so he hasn't gone back in there to see that the Starport was on a tech lab at any point, and I think the Raven has just been out of sight of him, so that is important. Last game there was no Raven. Last game, there was no mid-game attack like we're seeing here. And that's a huge difference. Mid-game attack would hit as the army count is a little low. You know, charge will not be done. So while this is a okay number of zealots, don't forget they're not actually that effective. And the Raven means the Colossus should be taken out of commission. Now, that might have been the first knowledge that Stats had of a Raven. Unfortunately, you can't do very much except just take this as seriously as you should have in the first place. But what you can do is try and engage and disengage. Force out the interference matrix, much like you would force out force fields if you were a Zerg facing a Protoss. So this is the best thing that Stats can do. You might also get a couple of lucky shots on the Marines or the tank, you know, already halfway dead. It's already a good start. Never been a video game movie that has not been awful. I think there's one or two that are like technically a video game movie, and like technically are okay. Like they're not great, but they're okay. I just can't remember what they are right now. Looks like Dream realizes this attack really ain't gonna do so much. It's much, 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 much worse when the Protoss has their Stalkers in the main defending against any potential drops, and then their Colossus are like wedged in defensively over here, so they get corralled really easily. That's when you see these type of pushes from the Terran actually just straight up win. But with knowledge is power, right? That's what you learn in like 5th grade elementary school. And that's what's been really the best thing about Stats' play, is that he's kept tabs on how this attack was going to work and has tried to circumvent any deadly circumstances. Still dangerous. These are two armies that can quite, you know, they do deliver blows to each other, but no chance to just get the easy, swift victory. And now this Raven is a lot less effective since the Colossus count is up to 4. It could technically interference matrix, I guess, all of them, but probably not going to happen. And soon enough, we'll also be talking about storms. So Raven never useless, just not as dangerous. Drop or just, well, I don't think it's a drop or run by. It was literally over there to defend against the Zealots that he figured were there. Stats has some amazing observer coverage. Observer, Zealot, Adept, Observer. Silent Hill, yeah. Tomb Raider was one of those, like, just decent. But yeah, I think people counted Detective Pikachu as one, and that was pretty good. It was enjoyable for sure. So now we have Dream going into the macro turtle phase, realizing that he can't actually do anything against Stats, and that being out in the middle of the map would be the worst thing he could do. And I do agree with that. He's trying to go into Liberators. So these Liberators, I actually like the choice he's made here. If you consider that as soon as you retreat, Stats takes the momentum. He moves out and into you, and you have to be a little afraid of a counter. Hard to counter the counter because nothing happened, but yeah, the counter. Liberators can help buy time, especially on a map that does have a couple of high ground, low ground. You know, these Liberator zones would be fairly effective. But I don't think that you go into full Liberator like you did in the series versus Zest. Again, I don't think it's very good, and I've been proven correct so far, but confirmation bias and all that stuff. But I like them as just the emergency defense. These can be effective turtle mode, and then into Vikings as fast as really possible, as soon as you feel safe. Which eventually Dream felt safe. Somehow catching this Warp Prism. I think he's just looking for the Zealots again, but catching the Warp Prism with the Zealots is quite good. He does miss these Zealots, which will still be a pain in the buttocks. And he does find the army actually reaching over to him, so he's got to get that siege up ready. He wants to get a couple of pot shots off on the Colossus before anything really happens. That's the best case scenario for the Terran army. It's not taking shots from 4 Colossus to the face as your Vikings jump on them. It's your Vikings doing damage first, and hopefully being able to make her away from the Colossus beams, because 4 Colossus, even if they're dying, if they shooting, it's a lot of damage. So Dream is forced to retreat entirely, but trying to save units, I guess, was dangerously close to losing a lot of his medevacs. He does fully retreat into his main base, but those Zealots went into the third. He had to siege up Liberators. He had to take a lot of his army back there. He does defend with not too bad of a supply. In fact, a rather good one. It's just that his army's split right now, so it doesn't look that big. It's also still a lot in that air, which now all consolidates together. And that's the army we see in the supply as it comes into cohesion, and it's going to go across the map looking for the attack. He's got to be careful. Liberators do stack up when they are sieged on kind of one spot, and that's when storms can definitely help out. You take out half the Liberator health, even if there's 6 or 7 of them, suddenly another storm or a stalker blink forward, and Liberators don't look nearly as good. Ditto for the Vikings, for certain. So a lot of these units are already weak. Tempests are out as well, looking for some of those one-shots on these weak units. EMPs want to blanket the army. They do blanket the army, but miss a 1 or 2 High Templar. Plus, he already took storm damage. Plus, Stats has another counter run by. No Warp Prism necessary. These actually look like, I guess that's from the main army or something like that. They're already weakened, but they are doing the job. 17 SCVs killed, plus a huge distraction. Dream forced to retreat. He does have 5 bases, so if he could just calm things down a little, defend and resaturate, he could be okay. He'd be behind in the bank, but he'd be alive. But can he actually do that? Stats successfully transition into Tempest with a good enough ground army. He's got some decent upgrades here. His Dreams +2 armor is very, very late. Actually, you know what? I thought he had 2-2. He does not. Never mind. He's almost on 2-2. So he will have an upgrade lead, but it's not the most astounding thing we've seen in this matchup. EMPs once again blanket the army, miss 1 High Templar in the very far back. That storm's going to be pretty juicy on the Vikings. Tempest do die pretty quickly. We're talking about 5 Tempests, an increasingly lower Viking count that's also increasingly deader. So many of these Vikings very low in health, but the ground army evaporates as soon as the bio jumps on top of it. The Colossus in full retreat, most of them already dead, but another huge Zealot run by, this time with the Warp Prism, so it's more than just a couple, and it could even be more if these Vikings weren't going to jump on top of it. But Dream is going to lose almost all of his workers. He was at 40-something at the end of the last attack, now down to 23, and Dream cannot continue. Just all it needs, all Stats needs is a couple more Charger reinforcements, and that army does not look nearly as good. And Dream is just going to tap out. GG. War Prisms. Pretty good. If you're going to face a Protoss player on 4 bases with your own